Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Matthew Shiner podcast. And in this episode, I wanted to talk about some recent facts I've been seeing about there being like mass droves of priests leaving the ministry, like a large percentage of priests leaving the ministry. And I've seen this online, I've seen a whole bunch of people sharing the statistic, and Vatican News, in fact, did a whole kind of video article about this online that I saw, and that kind of prompted me to make this video. And so, kind of what I want to talk about is that there are many ways in which we could talk about this. Why is this a problem? And the Vatican, the video I watched, said that really the crisis started around the time of World War II. And I can't remember exactly where I saw this, but there was some video talking about how kind of following World War II, there was just this differing view of kind of societal family, of how the family works. And I think a very good example of how our world views the family that our church doesn't, and I think that the family is very core and central to priestly vocations. If you have a good family, a holy devout family that, as an example, prays the rosary daily, as so many Catholic families have done for many, many, many years. I know one Irish family. This is a family that long, long ago, not too long ago, but I know this priest, and he comes from a family of multiple children, and two brothers became priests, him and his brother. Um, Besides that, Dr. Scott Hahn, who has, I want to say, um, seven children. I might be wrong. But two of his boys are priests. And put simply, and I'm not attacking this, but there are a lot of Catholic families that only have two or three children. And that's the norm. Societally, the norm for children, for families, is 2.5 kids. Um, and so, simply put, back in the day, your large Irish families, it was common that you would have many kids, and one of those kids would become a priest. And at the time, being a priest in those times where there were large Irish families, being a priest was a very revered thing, for families who had many kids. It was considered very good that you were a priest. Um, the problem is, as a society, and even as Catholics, we've lost that importance of marriage and the priesthood. Um, and so we can talk. I think the problem is where theology meets practice. And our problem is when theology, we can have perfect theology in theory. Unfortunately, that perfect theology falls apart when people and society doesn't respect that. Um, so we can have this wonderful understanding of marriage, this holy and devout understanding of marriage, but society will test that, and we can see this, we can understand this, that, just put simply, as a society, we've lost that sacredness of the family. Um, there's this story that I greatly like, that Mother Hillary Clinton asked Mother Teresa why she thought there had never been a female president. In response, Mother Teresa says, because the child was probably aborted. This has been attested to. I've heard it several times before. Um, but it just shows what others, Mother Teresa was by no means an American, how she viewed the society. The problem is, and it's not with every family, and it's not with every person, how we view jobs and vocations and children. The priesthood is not a job, it is a vocation. It is something you give your time and devotion to. Priests have duties. And how does that compare to a marriage is a vocation just like the priesthood? And married families have duties, right? These aren't sacramental duties, but they're duties nonetheless. So the duties of a priest are to console people, to give the sacraments to people. Married people, their duties are to care and raise good children. And I I have to look more into this, but Brian Holdsworth did a video on is the single life a vocation? And in practice, there sometimes is need in families for a single person who can kind of do assisting, who can babysit. And I guess in theory that sounds great, but that's the same thing of having young younger siblings or younger cousins who can do the babysitting and the caring, and grandparents too. So but I was recently having a conversation about this with someone, and so that was kind of one of the things they presented, is that yes, there is kind of a need for single people in a family, but I don't know, I kind of disagree on that. But the main purpose of this video obviously is to talk about this startling or sobering just statistic about priests. And most men, you can he was sharing this with the person I was talking with, and I know this is a fact too, that many people went to seminary. Many people of like the of our grandparents' generation, of his grandparents' generation, of his parents' generation, they went to seminary, but discerned out. And now in time there used to be high school seminaries, and many people went there. And I met someone recently who went to seminary. I heard of a story of someone who passed away a couple months ago, a couple years ago at this point, I believe. He went to seminary, and he went through almost up till ordination and dropped out. Joe Heschmeyer, very, very, very great Catholic speaker and apologist, went to seminary, was very close to being approved for ordination, and he got out of seminary too. Now, most men will discern out within 1 or 2 years of joining seminary, which is good. And there is a very lengthy process of becoming a priest in the Roman Rite, and there is also this selective process that has to go on with the vocations director and spiritual directors to make sure that, and psychologists too, that you are psychologically sound to do this ministry, but spiritually sound to even be joining seminary, and that you have the right intentions in joining seminary. And so we can talk for hours about practices of how people were chosen to be priests and all that. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but there are people who will discuss that. But put simply, there is an in-depth process of becoming a priest nowadays. You can't just walk in on the streets and be in seminary tomorrow. And so in part that kind of separates the Catholic Church from a lot of Protestant churches, even among Eastern churches. I'm not quite sure about a lot of the Eastern Catholic churches, but a lot of your Eastern Orthodox churches, you go through kind of a process of discernment, but it's not as I'm gonna say it's not as in depth. You don't go through years and years of study as it is in the church. I mean, I've seen this online, but I'm not quite sure how true it is. But in the Roman Rite, and especially against Protestants, yes, a lot of Protestants will go and study biblical or theology and all that, but it's not as prevalent, I guess you'd say, as in the Roman Rite, though it is kind of much more common nowadays. So the thing is, and how I see it, is that a lot of our priests are leaving the ministry, and this is how it has also been said. There's just a lot of pressure upon priests, and they are getting burned out within, I want to say 15 years was the number I heard. That might be too much or too little, but also when they were ordained, it was a different time, a different world, a different place. There was different issues. Now we're rapidly changing and rapidly growing. And one of the problems is we are becoming ever more and ever more divided among issues. And so, what we once viewed as the priesthood and such, societally, has changed, if you will. What people ask and request of priests has also changed because of there being a lack of priests. And so, while many priests used to just serve at one parish, that was their only job, and there might be other priests assisting them. Nowadays, we have priests who are serving at 2 or 3 parishes that have been combined. And so they're moving from one place to another to celebrate this Mass and the other Mass. And while many parishes have 2 priests, many don't. Many have 1 priest, and many priests are getting older, and we don't have the stock of priests to replace them once they retire and die out. We're not ordaining enough numbers to replace the already old growing stock of priests. And yes, it's a problem within religious orders too, that they're not getting enough priests. But I think it's more pressing of a need for parish priests, who are, if you will, the front lines. Yes, religious orders are important. Yes, they need priests, although most religious orders, their primary goal is not priests, but religious vocations, meaning brothers. And then they will ordain priests who can supply the sacraments to the brothers. But when we're talking about what most people will see as a priest and where most people are going to go for Mass, we're talking about the parish or diocesan priests, and that's where most of these priests are leaving, and where we need the most number of priests, and where, again, most priests are leaving, because these are the front lines of the priesthood. They are the people who are hearing confessions, who are celebrating Mass. We have priests who are working, again, at multiple different places, where they're doing multiple different jobs. And for many of them, it can be tiring, and they just don't have the break or relief. Because even if they were to take a break, who's going to take their spot? And so that's kind of where we are, is that most priests are leaving the ministry because they don't have the support. And that's the thing. That's what Vatican Reporter or whatever I was reading mentioned, is that we need support for our priests. And they were mentioning a place that offers support for priests. So the problem is we don't have enough vocations. And part of that is we don't have good priests who will inspire young men to become good priests. And so that's another thing. But we also don't have good families. And I've been adamant about this, that good priests will lead to good families, and that good families will lead to good priests. So good priests will lead to good families will lead to good priests will lead to good priests, and good families will lead to other good families. And so it's kind of a cycle of all these things are kind of dependent and reliant upon each other, that we need all these things. And so as a church, we have need of good families and good priests as much as together. We need both of these because we don't have, now I'm not saying that there aren't, but we don't have as many good families. We've lost kind of this importance of the family because even then, we have a lot of Catholics who are okay with divorce, who are divorced themselves. And it's not divorce that's the problem in the church. Divorce is the breaking up of a civil union. Separation is acceptable in the church. However, that union is never not valid. And so annulment is not Catholic divorce. It is an acceptance that a valid union never took place. So those two people who were married were never married. So an annulment, no, it's not Catholic divorce. It just is that a valid union never took place. It doesn't cancel a union. The union never took place. And so part of that is, as a society, as a church, we've lost that sense of marriage. That marriage is this indissoluble union where we are called to bring forth and care for children, to, for lack of a better words, to just put it simply, not for lack of better words, but just to put it simply, to raise saints. That's the job of a married man and a married woman, is to raise saints, to raise children for the kingdom, who will become the next generation to have children, who will become the next generation to be a priest, who will become the next generation to be our brothers, who will become the next generation to have our sisters, so on, so forth. We want to raise good little saints who will then become saintly priests, will then become saintly brothers, will then become saintly sisters, who will then become saintly mothers and fathers, able to raise good and holy children, just like we, as married people, want to do. If you are married, your goal should be, hey, I want to have children for the kingdom, if you will. I want to raise good and holy children. And so this is this is a longer video than normal. Most of my videos have now been very short, but I just think this is such a pressing and important issue. And I feel like I've just scratched the surface. Like, there's so much more we can talk about with the priesthood. And there's so many more opinions and options and considerations to make. We've just kind of, again, scratched the surface. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about this because I was going to talk about the statistic. I had a video scripted out, but in the end, well, that went down the wayside. So God bless, and I will see you all next time. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Doing so helps us to spread this Catholic and Christian message to all. Please also consider supporting this channel on Patreon.